Yay! Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to the first webinar Wednesday of 2021.
Indeed. And what's happened to the world? We were so hopeful that we were leaving 2020 behind, and 2020 was going to be not an immediate, but at least the start of a brighter future. And we've just left the building and it's all gone to hell, hasn't it?
It has. But we still need to be hopeful, and we still need to look forward. And we are beginning to hear about more people who are getting vaccinated, and that's really what everybody's holding on to, isn't it? Really holding on to that idea that it is really tough for so many people at the moment, but we have got the vaccination that's beginning to get rolled out. Just for anyone who's joining us live for the first time, we are broadcasting through this live streaming. Let's not get too grand about this. We're live streaming through In Control Scotland Facebook and through In Control Scotland YouTube channels. There's an opportunity to comment. So you can put in your comments, or you can ask any questions. And today our guests are Donald MacLeod from Self-Directed Sport Scotland, who's taken over as Chief Executive there at the back end of last year. And Lucy Mulvey, who's the Director of Policy and Communication at Health and Social Care Alliance Scotland. So we've got them joining us about 10 past, haven't we, today, Alistair?
We have indeed.
And they're going to talk about, not just about themselves, but also going to talk about the piece of research that they've been involved in. My support, my choice. Have I got that the right way around?
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's good. But we haven't been entirely quiet since we've left the building, since the previous discussions. We've been doing our Feel Good Fridays, for example, and we had a festive Friday, and we had a Friday the 1st as well, which was the very first. Oh, we've got a hello from Gillian as well. Hello, Gillian. Any questions? Remember, you can just ask us as we go along. So we had really felt that being Christmas and New Year, especially not being able to see people with the restrictions, really very much, it was potentially a very lonely time for some folk, and so the ability to catch up and just have a low key chat and a bit of fun together was really good. We didn't have massive numbers, but we had some new folk joining us as well, so that was really great. And that's just encapsulated that whole idea of just being there for one another, just not massive expectations, but just finding the opportunities to connect to other people. And that was one guy. It was his first ever online meeting.
Yeah,
on the
1st of January.
And I thought, yeah, we go. And really crucially, we've had. He's now been to 3 meetings. So because he went to the following Feel Good Friday, and he was at the Stay Up Late Northeast meeting last night.
Yeah. Excellent. You never get him offline now.
Never get him offline. So appreciating that he's done that, and appreciations to the staff that made it happen as well. Yeah,
excellent. Good. And how's your shed doing, Alistair? Is it just the same? Is it cold out there?
It's pretty frosty. My pond is frozen over. The poor birds, I have to bash a hole in the ice so that the birds can have a drink. But no, I mean it's all right. It's all right. It's a bit slidey up here, but
okay. I might use that one later. My pond is frozen over. I'm not sure what it means, but anyway, I might use it later.
My pond is frozen over, indeed.
It's an old Russian proverb, I think, that one.
Yes.
For brighter days ahead, when the pond melts a little bit more.
I'll use it in the next No Labels, No Walls session, right?
Yeah. And we're also getting involved with something called Citizen TV, aren't we, Alistair?
We are indeed.
Launching on when is it? The 25th of January, actually. Something called Citizen Network TV. So it's bringing people online from around the world, and people creating their own content, some art, some talk, some music. You're getting involved through the Man of a Day work that you do as well, or the Man of a Day UK stuff. We're gonna broadcast the State Blade Scotland music sessions through there. So if anybody wants to investigate that, they can just look up Citizen Network TV from the 25th of January, or get in touch with us, and we'll send you out some info about it as well.
Yeah, and we still have the No Labels, No Walls things that happen every Monday at 5 o'clock UK time, which is lots of collaborators on the Citizen Network TV are going to be there, and it's free and open to everybody, and it's a right mix of art, music, like just the stuff you were talking about, citizenship, political activism, all sorts of stuff.
It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for people to create in whatever way they want. I think that's why it's good. And sometimes, some weeks you think, I really enjoyed that, and some weeks you think, okay, I might have.
It's very diverse, isn't it? It's very diverse. It is. Yeah. Yeah, and that's okay. So people can just jump in when they feel like it, and back out again if they don't. So absolutely.
Okay, what else are you doing this week, Alistair?
What else am I doing this week?
Not going far from the shed, I'm sure.
Far from the shed. I know. I feel like it should be the view from the shed this week. I have been mostly, it's like a episode of the Fast Show, isn't it? And we've got a Happy New Year from Michael. Yeah, it certainly is. It's certainly a new year, but it's just trying to make the happiness go round. And a hello from Craig Steele as well. So remember, you can ask us any questions when Lucy and Donald join us as well. If there's anything that you want to hear a bit more about, please feel free to join us if you're doing it live. But remember, if you're asking questions after the fact, we won't be able to answer. So
if we they can send in questions, people can send in questions afterwards as well, actually, if they want to. So anybody who sees anything on any of our broadcasts on Webinar Wednesdays or any of the others, like Tuesday Talks or the State Blade Scotland music sessions as well, if you see anything and you want to comment on it, just get in touch with us directly, and we're happy to get back to you about any of the aspects of the things that we are talking about or broadcasting or What were you saying about what you're doing? What else are you doing this week? When I said you're only going to be in the shed.
I'm going to be in the shed. Yeah, I'm just going to be in the shed. So it's going to be, we've got some follow up with Social Work Scotland stuff. We've got some New Roots Home stuff. We've got some Feel Good Friday stuff. We've got so just following up on a lots of bits and bobs, trying to make sure that we just keep the show on the road, despite these really trying times. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm trying to write up a variation on the easy read guide that June put together about the level 4 restriction stuff. About the general levels restrictions. So because people have been a bit anxious about for example, the shops increasing their policing of the mask wearing, which is generally a good thing. But in terms of people with exemptions, we want to make sure that there's no backlash to that people feel prepared for sharing that exemption, so that they're not the target of any, nastiness, which it can be, because we're getting these elevated times and people can sometimes lose their patience a little bit. What about yourself?
Well, I'm involved in several of those similar bits of work. We've been talking about the rights and equalities work again this week. So we're just really gearing up, following up, developing the things that we were doing before. Next week, I've got several meetings with, at least I think I'm going to have several meetings with different local authorities around some of the children's work. Bit of work in Edinburgh around individual service funds that we're restarting again next week after Christmas. So just preparing some of those really today, I think.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, well, getting back into it. Okay, so we'll welcome our guests on. So here's Lucy and here's Donald.
Hello. Hi, both of you.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, that's good. So what we'll do is we'll always try and ask you questions in turn, if you know what I mean, just so that we don't, so that we try and get it so that people can hear it really well. So first of all, we'll just ask you to introduce yourself. So Lucy, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, I will. Hi everyone, and thanks so much for the invitation to take part today. My name's Lucy Mulvey, and I'm the Director of Policy and Communications at the Health and Social Care Alliance, which is a national third sector intermediary for a range of health and care organisations and people, including disabled people, people living with long-term conditions and unpaid carers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Just a very quick question. How long has the Alliance been around? It feels like it's been around a long time.
Yeah, so the Alliance was formed around 11 or so years ago. Originally was called the Long-Term Conditions Alliance Scotland, and was initially a kind of more of a collective or a movement rather than an organisation constituted in its own right. Brought together by a range of third sector organisations working on condition-specific long-term conditions. So founding members included, for example, Diabetes Scotland and others. And the original intention was to bring the work together with a view to specifically focusing on developing and co-producing Scotland's first self-management strategy, Go On Your Cell, which is the current strategy still. But since then, the Alliance, more and more people wanted to become members and get involved in the work and so on. So the Alliance formed as a separate entity, we're a registered charity and so on in Scotland, and now. I think we're nearly at 3,000 members. So we do represent and have in our members we're a very broad church as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And Alistair's been sharing your website and Facebook contact details along the bottom as you've been talking there. Donald, do you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of that history behind SDSS as well?
Sure, yeah. I'm Donald MacLeod. I'm Chief Executive of Self-Directed Support Scotland. Self-Directed Support Scotland's been around, it's developed organically as well from our members over the past 10 years or so. We're similar to the Alliance, a national partner in terms of the delivery for the self-directed support strategy, the Scottish Government self-directed support strategy. We're a membership organisation of independent support organisations. So our purpose, if you like, is capacity building in the third sector in terms of supporting SDS delivery in line with the strategy with our membership of independent support organisations to effectively support people. And I think, I came on, I'll talk about myself in a minute, but last August, and I think the organisation, one of the first things that we had to do was look at the direction of the organisation and to undertake some strategic planning and look at how we engage more with purchasers, with the local authority. And we'll move on to that, I'm sure, but how we've engaged with the current review of social care as well that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So we can talk more specifically about the My Choice, My Support in a minute as well. But just I think we always like to ask people just to give us a little reflection on what the whole COVID situation has meant for your work and how it's changed your work and what you do. So, Lucy, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. In terms of the work that the Alliance does, I'd certainly recommend people go, if they don't know us, go and have a look at the website and you'll get a flavour from that in the Browse Our Work section about all the different kind of things we do. And certainly a lot of our work generally, but a lot of my work is obviously in policy and communications. And actually, I have to say that, first of all, I've been incredibly lucky that I've managed to keep my job during the pandemic when many of our members and our partners in the third sector have obviously been having to do things like furlough staff and make staff redundant because of the really serious funding issue that's happening in the sector, and that's one of the issues we have been working on. So I've been lucky to have a job, and I have to say, from a work perspective, never been busier. We produced, I think, like an unbelievable number of policy briefings and consultation responses to not only COVID-related issues, for example, the Scottish Government's framework on COVID response, the proposed and actual changes to social care assessments that were brought in under emergency legislation, a whole plethora of other COVID-related issues. But some of the other work kind of carried on as well, so there was still work going on, consulting on the rehabilitation framework, for example, still work going on looking at the Scottish budget for the coming year. And those were all issues that we were mindful of needing to be in and about on, because our job is to inform and influence national policy that's of interest and import to our members, whether they're individuals with lived experience or the third sector organisations that work for and with them. We did a big shift in terms of our comms work, and particularly our events work, to move online. And that, like everybody, we couldn't do the face-to-face stuff anymore. And that's really in the DNA of the Alliance, is doing engagement, and particularly out and about, meeting people, bringing people together. Because we're such a broad church, that's one of the strengths, is that we can get a lot of people wearing very different hats in a room at the same time. And so making the shift then to do that online, while we were trying to ensure that digital exclusion and the digital divide did not impact too heavily on people in that. And actually, what we found has been quite interesting with that. So while certainly I think it's fair to say there's been a drop-off in engagement with some people that usually get involved in our work because they're not necessarily not able to engage for financial or technical reasons, but it's not for them. Some people don't want to engage that way. But actually what it meant is that we did get much more engagement and involvement from some of our members and partners further afield, which has been great. So we've I've seen more of some of the people we work with up in Shetland and the Orkneys in this past 10-month period than I'd seen for the whole 5 years I've been working at the Alliance. So that has been really smashing. So there's certainly, I think, for that, loads of learning for us, post-pandemic engagement work, and how we hold on to all the things that have worked really well in terms of maximising involvement, participation, engagement. But don't go back to business as usual and just always hold one big event a year in the Central Belt and expect everybody to kind of come to us. And I think that'll be the same for lots and lots of organisations in the sector. So I have to say it's been an interesting time, incredibly busy, but I have to say I'm very grateful for that, because my life would be very difficult, as many people's lives are, if I hadn't been able to hold on to my job.
Yeah, no, lots of really interesting reflections there, and very similar to some of the things that we would be saying about our own work as well, wouldn't it be, Alistair?
Yeah.
In terms of and also just really making sure that we don't lose any of that, because there's lots of learning that, and it will be to be honest, it'll be quite easy to lose some of it, but we must just need to make sure that we hold on to as much of it as we can for the future, so that we take the positives that we can from this really challenging and difficult times. And I'll just ask Donald another question, Alistair, and then I'll let you have questions as well. I feel like I've been asking him all so far today. Donald, because you actually joined SDSS halfway, in August, as you said, didn't you? So we're already in severe restrictions, although sort of in between the most serious restrictions, stringent restrictions that we've had. So you joined an organisation that had needed to think about how it did things and was continuing to do that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose from just like Lucy said, I'm so grateful to have a job in these times. I'm one of the people that it did affect, that it affected my livelihood. It affected I had led on the autism policy for 5 years, and I left that organisation to set up my own autism practice, autism consultancy. And after having built it up, things were going great. I had a year's worth of work planned ahead, and starting from March. And then the most important thing, of course, is how this has affected people's physical health. But the other thing, it's affected people's mental health so badly, and people's employment. So I was one of the people that was affected and had to rethink. And yeah, when I looked at the organisation and the position, it seemed something I was familiar with in terms of working with government policy and implementing it at a national and local level. So yes, I joined in August, and it's been all changed for the organisation because we've got a whole new team. Well, half the team, a great small team, but half the team was new. It was me and a communications person, Michael, who joined August and September. And had to really find our feet and hit the ground running at the same time. Planning for the year ahead, the organisation had to adapt, as Lucy said, to the COVID. We're supporting a range of organisations, 50 odd members, who were having to adapt themselves to support people whose STS journey had been stalled, halted, just not starting, who weren't able to progress with planning their lives and exercising choice and control. And also changing their relationship with local authorities and health and social care partnerships in terms of how they delivered their services, how they get involved in things like PPE distribution, things like that. We as well had to move everything online. And one of the first things I had to do was plan our online AGM, which was not without challenges, as Lucy will testify to, technically. At a time when we were on the cusp of publishing the research that we'll move on to shortly, which had been ongoing work over a 2-year period into people's experiences of STS, the biggest piece of work of its kind to date. And with things like standardization attempts, coming in from Social Work Scotland with the review of adult social care. So a lot of really key things going on. And we're coming towards the end of a 10-year strategy. What next? Well, we'll hopefully find out in the next month or two. And it's hard. I mean, we've had this discussion as well, Keith. It's hard to plan ahead, but people, it's been so impressive the way that independent support organisations have adapted to the COVID situation, and supporting people, and facing challenge people who, the things like making sure that they've got proper access to local authority complaint procedures, all these sorts of things that individuals have faced. So yes, it's been an interesting time to join an organisation. From without leaving the house, been interviewed in my bedroom, and the next thing you're running an AGM, and we've got a conference coming up in a couple of months.
It's interesting that things that were just no-nos before have suddenly become possible, and this idea that you had to commute and you had to be in the office to do tasks that, and not just in our field of work. I mean, I've got a friend who works in the oil industry, and he used to fly out, and then we go by armed escort, in Iraq, to sit at a computer and to do the numbers for drilling. And that always struck me as absolutely bonkers, because he was never on site. He was always sitting behind a computer, and I failed to understand why he needed to be there and he couldn't do that. And he's proved now that he can do it from here. So whether or not they go back to it, but there's lots of things around the world where people have stopped and thought, what's the best way? But there is definitely a difference in terms of the level of engagement. I'm definitely a face-to-face person, and I don't want to be somebody that advocates that digital is good enough on its own, but it's definitely a good
Yeah.
To what we had.
Yeah, I am too, but I think there's been, in some ways, there's been more, I don't want to be idealistic about this, but there's been more of a sense of community. Things like the SDS Collective has come into its own during this period and produced the call to action that ended up being embedded in government guidance.
Yes.
So there's been far more of an appetite for things like that. We're looking at developing online forums and so on. There's far more engagement as a community, if you like.
Yeah, and although you had a lot of technical problems in your AGM, actually one of the things that I did like was with the format was the way that the breakout rooms sort of worked. Because I thought that was really, I'd never seen that before. So rather than being physically shoved in a room with 4 strangers, you could browse the groups, like walking past and decide if you wanted to join the group. And for some people whose anxiety is huge about that, they're quite happy to be part of a big group, but being in a small group and being expected to speak to strangers, I know for some people that's enough to just put them completely off of joining. So I'm interested in that sort of technology because it did sort of blend that real life control of I can join this or I can join that. And I think that sense of control is really important.
What I like about online breakout rooms is you actually get taken back exactly on time because you can't run over. So it's excellent. I've only got 2 more minutes in here and I'll be back out in the main room. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, we probably should talk about my choice and the piece of research. And Donald, you'd sort of started to make a bit of reference. But Lucy, do you want to just tell us a bit about where that came from and what it's been involved and what it's produced? So what it's beginning to produce so far.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much. And thanks again for the opportunity to kind of come on and tell everybody about it. And some people might already be aware of this through other events that we've held. Like, for example, we did a session on it at the SDSS AGM back in November. But basically, My Support, My Choice is a really important bit of national and thematic research that the Alliance and Self-Directed Support carried out together, looking specifically at people's experiences of SDS and social care more broadly. And it was carried out pre-pandemic, I hasten to add. But we feel that, as far as we're aware, it's the largest consultation with people about their experiences to date in Scotland. And so as such, it provides really vital evidence of what's working and what's not working for people. And based on that evidence that we've gathered, we've made a series in the national report. We've made a series of about 66 recommendations for either continued good practice, because there were examples of good practice, or change where change is needed and improvement is either small improvements or much bigger improvements to the system. So it was a mixed methods research project for those of you like me who's a bit of a research dweeb. So we did a survey, we did one-to-one interviews, and we did a series of focus groups. There's a national report, and there's an easy read version of that as well. I think you've put the link, thanks very much for doing that, into the comments. The reports on the SDSS website, they're also available on the Alliance website. Within that national report, there's also kind of one-page thematic reports looking at the experiences of some population groups of some particular issues. So, for example, there's some material or evidence, rather, we were able to pull out about the experiences of homeless people. I've had about SDS, experiences that older people have had, particularly around information about SDS, disabled parents and carers. Separate thematic reports have also been published looking in detail at the experiences of specific population groups, including, not limited to, women as users of SDS, as opposed to women as unpaid carers. Of course, women are the majority of unpaid carers in Scotland. Women as users of SDS, blind and partially sighted people's experiences, the experiences of people with learning difficulties, the experiences of people from the BAME community, and last but not least, the experiences of people who've got lived experience of mental health issues. Reports are all out now, online, available, and we've been out and about sharing the findings, sharing the recommendations at events like the SDSS AGM and here today. We've been giving interviews about them and writing newspaper articles about it, and we'll be continuing to do that, as well as holding meetings with those individuals and bodies that we think are in a position to do something about some of this, including our colleagues in Scottish Government. Both our organisations are in part funded by Scottish Government, and that funding is used to carry out this research. I would hasten to add that the research is completely independent, though, of government. We'll be doing that with local government as well. One of the intentions of this project was that we would do local authority area-specific reports as well. So those reports, that was all held up somewhat by COVID. Those reports will be coming out within the first quarter, first half of this year, for some specific areas, including, I remember off the top of my head, Moray, Dumfries and Galloway, Scottish Borders, Glasgow, South Lanarkshire, Highland. And we'll be also holding local area feedback sessions in those areas for all interested and relevant stakeholders to explore the report, explore the findings and the recommendations, and look at co-producing solutions to any of the issues that have been highlighted in them. And basically then out and about just further helping to spread the love, as I like to say, in terms of people making use of this as really valuable evidence from people's experience about what works, and so what needs to change in order to make the system work as best as it possibly can, which we know it's not doing at the moment for everyone.
Yeah. So still, and well, first of all, 66. First of all, a suite of different documents there, isn't there? Secondly, 66 recommendations, which is a lot, but that probably does reflect your very final point there, that there's still lots and lots to do for this to work in the way that we, all of us, and everybody whose personal experiences you've heard about would want it to work. So, Donald, just any where are you at with all that then, with the different number of the information that's been coming through and getting it out there to people and
I think so far? As Lucy's pointed out, that one of the overriding things that I took from the report was that when it works, there was about over 3/4 of the people that we consulted said that when it works really well, and it's transformative and put them in charge of their lives, and that was transformational. So that's worth holding on to, but it's not been the case for everybody. And so it's important now what we do with it. So it's important that we work with our main partners, and we are doing so. We're working with Social Work Scotland, so and they're committed to taking on all of these recommendations while they're implementing the standards that they've developed and had signed off by COSLA now. We're working with the STS Practice Network and all the STS local authority leads across the country. We're working with our Scottish Government colleagues. We had Derek Feely from the Independent Review of Adult Social Care involved at the AGM, and they've been involved since, and they're going to be using some of the data from the report to inform their review. So it's great that independent voice has been heard, and we're dealing with in different ways every day. It's changed the nature of the inquiries that we've had during the period, certainly in terms of that thing I was saying about COVID suppressing the way in which SDS is currently implemented, created bigger challenge for people. So we know that we're working towards. We've got our National Voice, the annual conference coming up in March. So we hope to be able to report on the review, the outcome of the review, which should be in February, and we will report on the progress that the research is making and the impact that it's making, and the mechanisms for doing that.
Yeah, we've got a thanks for that. We've got a little point from Fiona just saying that digital only works if you've got the money for text, data, and skills. It isn't a fundamental question in SDS social care assessments. I mean, we've had some kit from Connecting Scotland, which we've been involved, but it's been very targeted, the group. So it's, and one of the things we've noticed definitely all throughout this has been, it's not just about providing the kit, it's about that confidence. And you know, sometimes I've had to have multiple visits to people and trials, you know, otherwise folk are just been, it's too much, I can't do it.
Yeah, and not just the kit, but the connectivity. There's still, you know, issues with connectivity in various parts of Scotland, and it's the ongoing access as well. So, you know, you can provide somebody with a tablet or a laptop, whatever, but unless you're also supporting them in an ongoing basis with the cost of data packages and so on, then you know, all they've really got is an extra bit of plastic sitting around the house. So there's a lot in that. We've the Alliance has actually just very recently submitted a response to the Scottish Government's consultation on the national digital strategy. Anybody who's interested in that, and we've spoken about this issue and spoken about the need to take an equalities and human rights based approach to any digital strategy, which would ultimately filter down and result in programmes like Connecting Scotland and others. Certainly I know that at the Alliance, our links worker practitioners have been working with clients and patients and GP practices and deep end practices in Glasgow to access that, the Connecting Scotland. And I think when it's worked very well with people. But like you say as well, Alistair, it's the confidence and it's the actual skills to be able to use this stuff. Some people take it like a duck to water. You know, my dad's in his 80s and is become the right silver surfer. But I'm still getting, you know, questions and emails. You know, how do I do this? How do I do that and the other? And it's an ongoing thing.
It is. So that's really helpful. One of the things I was going to ask as well is, given that obviously it's a very comprehensive document, My Support, My Choice, and even the easy read one's 48 pages. So there's so much content, right? There's so much content there. The government's obviously put out lots of additional guidance during COVID. And certainly my interpretation of that is a lot of it's been really helpful, really good, you know, in terms of encouraging that flexibility, different ways of meeting people, making it work, whatever. And I guess I'm just trying to think about the fit between what the findings have shown in terms of when it's worked, and when it hasn't, you know, it's been pretty dire. And the contrast between that and what the government's been saying and what you've been seeing on the ground, and how you aim to, if there's any first steps as to how you can narrow that gap, you know, for people actually on the ground. I'll maybe just ask you, Donald, if you want.
Narrowing the gap for people on the ground. Well, I think one of the key things that the report highlights is the importance of the relationship between the practitioner and the individual and the information that's shared with them. And I think that's the main thing. One of the quite alarming things that came out for me was the lack of education for social workers. New social workers who are coming out with it's not part of the SDS isn't part of the curriculum. You know, and it's only taught in pockets. So, you know, there's the part on the ground where the first point is that needs addressed, so that relationships, the information that's given to the individuals of a quality nature, that they have time to process it, they get help understanding it, they get time to review it, change their mind, come back. It's highlighted the need for independent support, for brokerage, and for advocacy as well. So I think it raises the importance of all these elements. That, you know, the report was broken down into a number of areas, looked at information about STS, informed choice and control, communication and relationships with social work, the impact on family and relationships, on mental health, as Lucy was saying, care staff recruitment, training and quality, independent advocacy and support. And I suppose for us, our focus has to be on quality. Our event coming up, is the theme's going to be quality, and there are lots of elements that are happening just now. Different people grappling with quality, whether it's from the workforce element, from the SSSC, whether it's from Social Work Scotland government or the review itself, and we want to be able to make sure that the report informs that. But yeah, it's that very much that relationship on the ground between individuals and who helps them in their journey. And at the moment, a lot of that's been stalled.
Yeah, and so that is one of the things that I've noticed in some of my interactions with individuals and families has been sometimes they'll have a vision about how to make it work, and if it doesn't match the system, despite the government's guidance, that quite often it's still a frustrating, time-consuming, starting from ground level of you've got to argue why you should have that, rather than that does this meet with the guidance? You know, you need to argue why we need to deviate from what the individual and what the family has asked for. And I've dealt with many, you know, folk just about on their knees, broken by arguing back and forth. Well, we've offered you this, so that's sufficient. And you're sometimes you're talking about creating a new relationship where they've got an existing relationship. Sometimes things that cost less than what the official response is, and still we're back to this thing of you've got to start like it's the first time somebody's ever suggested it. And that's the bit that I find just so heartbreaking, that we haven't managed to shift that power balance to you have to argue why it needs to be different to what the individual asked for, rather than you need to start from scratch. Anybody got any observations on it?
You know, and Lucy and I have been talking about this recently, but taking a human rights approach. It's, you know, the guidance isn't always aligned with human rights, and it's an awful lot of the support we've given has been around human rights approaches, and even to the extent in some cases involving the Scottish Commission for Human Rights. Lucy's maybe got more to say on that as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the thing is that it's the you know, the oft talked about implementation gap. So, you know, when you have, and it's not just, I don't think it's just social care. We can have this. You see this in education as well recently, particularly with the access to online education during this recent lockdown, and the approach that different schools and different local authority areas can take, and that's what happens when you allow for local delivery of a national policy and guidelines. There is going to be variation. It's the extent to which that variation is acceptable from the point of view of the people who are actually using these services, and acceptable from if you're looking at it through an equalities lens and a human rights lens. You know, let's not forget that equalities are in legislation. There's the Equalities Act. There are duties on these public bodies as well to take action to ensure that activity, you know, there's the public sector equality duty and there's a socio-economic duty, for example. What's less in our law is the human rights aspect. And while one could argue that there are certain, you know, rights-based elements of Self-Directed Support Act, it's certainly true to say that needs to be much more you know, much strengthened from an international human rights law perspective. So there's the action that's going on elsewhere, a bit of work that the Alliance is also involved in to support that, incorporating international treaties into Scots law, including the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, which would, I think, mean that there will be substantial and fundamental changes to legislation and practice around areas like social care and any other aspect of disabled people's lives, the lives of people living with long-term conditions and unpaid carers, and all of us effectively, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. But I think that's the thing, is that the problem is really fundamental for me. I'm not necessarily saying that this is an Alliance position thing, so I should probably do that caveat, because this is recorded and will be going out. I think my view has always been is that there's a problem with when you have some equalities and rights-based national law and guidance and so on. But actually, the problem is you can't put that into practice, because what the driver is in localities and local areas is the availability of resources, and having already a prefixed sum that then needs to be dispersed amongst whatever, and that then what leads us down the path of the eligibility criteria issues, not being able to find it. That leads then people to want to not tell people about SDS, because we're only going to have to say no to you unless you're in real crisis, and all. It just becomes this really kind of snowballing effect. So unless you're actually going to put the rights and equality stuff into finance processes as well, the commissioning and procurement processes as well, then you're always going to have this tension, this rubbing up against each other of the system trying to do one thing on the one hand, but something else completely really different, and ending up, and who comes out on top of that? Most of the time it's the gatekeepers of the resources, effectively. So with the best will in the world, even the most proactive, positive person working as a social work professional at the moment, of which we heard many examples during our research. And I have to say, that's the other thing about this research, is that it's not just all doom and gloom. There are some real examples in there. People talk firsthand about these brilliant conversations they've had with social workers that they feel have gone above and beyond to help them maximise their packages of support, etc., all that kind of stuff. It is possible, but even some social workers that want to do that are stymied.
Yeah.
They are pushing for that. They're wanting to do that. At the end of the day, it's not ultimately their decision to make, and they're not even in the room when the decision is taken. And so there's bits of the system like that really kind of need to change. Because then what's happening is you get people who are having great conversations and stuff with their social worker, comes to aught.
Yes.
That's even more frustrating than not having those conversations in the first place, I think.
Exactly.
Alistair, I was just going to say, do you want to just share we just had a couple more comments that have come in.
A couple more, yeah.
And maybe we could share them quickly, but then really I'm saying that we're coming to the point where we need to ask you for your final comments, really. So just final comments, and also obviously an opportunity for you to tell us about anything you've got coming up just now. So we've got some comments there that talk about a bit about connectivity and digital insurance, and then really something else which is actually reflecting a bit about what you've been saying, Lucy, there, haven't it, about the systematic challenges that people are facing, essentially.
Yes.
And the what feels very, very difficult for people when it's not working well. But also bringing it back to that thing that you have said that actually it's quite heartening to hear, because it's not always what you do here, that 3/4 of those people who are there are talking about the transformative effect and the positive impact that actually directing their own support has had for them. So we are at 49 minutes actually now, and we try and finish this by 50 usually, don't we, Alistair? So we're just going to come back round to you for your final comments. So Donald, I'll go to you first for your final comments.
Okay, I suppose the other element, Alistair asked about where the initial work's needed on the ground. This huge piece of work that took 2 years to do, it was done by two small organisations. We'll support the implementation of that and the usefulness of that, and we'll continue to do that. We'll take the thematic reports out on the road, and the local authority engagement sessions when we publish those reports in the spring, although that'll be interesting to see how we do that online. That's great, and we'll continue to do that. But what happens? This is a one-off piece of work. It cannot be a one-off piece of work. Where is that information going to be collected? That disaggregated data on an ongoing basis in each local area and across the board. And most importantly, how does that information then? How do people's stories then inform support? How does that change how SDS is delivered? So that's my main issue, I suppose, there from the report. In terms of what we've got coming up, we've got as I've mentioned, the National Voice, our conference coming up on the 10th of March. The theme will be quality. We'll hope to report on further information on the research, the My Sport, My Choice. We will hope to report on the review of adult social care and various other things. At that, we'll be launching, we've been developing an online discussion forum. There's been such an appetite for online work, as we've said. Some of you will have had emails out in this week about calls for trailblazers to start to trailblaze elements of it. We're going to have various topics discussed on these forums, and it'll be quite a sophisticated mechanism. And we want it to be as useful as possible for people, and not to be, my experience of these things before is they can become quite static. So how we continue to engage usefully with people online. The other thing that we've been working on is a personal assistant employer's handbook. There was a handbook published a number of years ago, and we're in the process of revising that. We've got a working group that are really committed from our membership and have produced some fantastic content and revised what was existing there. We're continuing to call it the handbook because it takes, although it's an online resource, it takes the form of a handbook, and we want to make it as useful as possible to people and take account of, as Alistair mentioned, that wealth of that range of national variations that there are in terms of how SDS is implemented across the board. And again, it'll be quite a sophisticated platform so that people can say where they're from, where their point in the journey is, and they can gather information that will be useful to them and as a PA employer. I would also ask anybody has got anything that they feel should be highlighted and given either centre stage or workshop airtime at the conference to please get in touch. We're glad to hear from you. And thanks very much for inviting us along today to talk about this and the research.
Thank you, Donald. And Lucy?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to support everything that Donald said, obviously, and basically, just in response to the comments that have been added there, absolutely, Jim. SDS, social care, it's a means to an end. It's meant to help people live as independently as possible and as they want and participate in and contribute to Scottish society. So it should be flexible enough, in my opinion, that connectivity and assistance should be part of that, if that is what is the preference and requirement of the person and their family and so on involved. And yes, I completely agree with you, Fiona, as well, which is why we need system change. We need system change to make it more accountable. There have been some steps, I think, we've seen in the way that, for example, the Care Inspectorate has used the more rights-based national health and care standards to frame its SDS thematic review of 6 local authority and partnership areas a while ago now. But it's the so what question with that. It's like what's happened as a consequence of that report that has found change that needs to be made, quite specific recommendations in it. I think, what happens after that, now that that report is out there, where is there in the system the accountability for this has been recommended? Now you have to make this change and you have to evidence and demonstrate that you've made this change, and as a consequence things have improved, or we just end up in the same system that we've got at the moment where it's like it's the same issues come up time and time and time and time again. And that's the thing I would say about this report, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people who've got direct experience of social care and SDS either of accessing and using it for yourself, for your family, for anybody in your life, for you as a professional. There's not going to be a whole heap of a lot in this that's new to you. You will have heard of these stories. You will have come across these experiences yourself. But what this is actually a bit of robust research that's been done, finally been done, and that's now out there so that people can use it to refer to it and say, this is not just anecdotal stories. This is actually a research report that backs up what we've been saying. In terms of what's coming up for us, as Donald said, we're going to be out and about sharing it. Anybody interested in the Alliance, please do go and have a look at our website, look at our Facebook, look at our Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're in all sorts of the socials, basically, which ostensibly I'm supposed to kind of oversee, but I let my much younger and more experienced colleagues do most of that, I have to say. But we've got a week-long new event in our calendar coming up the last week of February. We're calling it the Digital Gathering. There may be some stuff in that. We'll be publicising that sometime this week, and there'll be a programme going up and stuff. So there could be things in that would be of interest. And in June, we'll be holding our big annual conference, and there will most definitely be stuff on the research on this, stuff about social care, about SDS and others. And last but not least, a pitch for anybody here who's not a member of the Alliance, whether as an individual or as an organisation, please do take a look at the membership part of our website. We're a very friendly bunch. It's a really good way to get involved in and about our work, but also to meet other people, to network and to do more engagement. So thanks again, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Alistair? Any comments?
No, I really thanks a lot for all you've shared and your honesty, and I just hope that we can make it less exhausting. The fact that we know a lot of this stuff, the credibility is something that becomes built on a progressive basis rather than this boom and bust of kind of, you get something, you get a response that says, oh yes, we're going to change stuff, and then a few words are shifted and some practice changes short term, and then it slumps back. We've got to keep that impetus so that once it's out there, it can't go away. And that's for me the accountability and getting the stories out there, and also that thing that Donald was saying about getting it on the curriculum so that people coming through believe that and have it in their DNA, so that if the local process doesn't support that, then for whatever reason, then we come back and say, yeah, no, well, we have to change this. We have to follow what the government says. We have to follow human rights, and let's not let up on this until we get that happening. So yeah, no, it's good to have a fire in our bellies as we start the new year. Keith?
Well, I think I would just say thanks to Donald and Lucy for your thoughtful and articulate contribution today, because I think it's made me feel more hopeful in the start of the new year. So that's good in its own way. And I also like imagining when people say things. I like imagining what you're saying. So I've been imagining sitting in a broad church wearing various different hats, and I quite like that idea as well. So thanks for your contributions. We will, we'll be back next week with Webinar Wednesday, same time, same place. And yeah, look forward to seeing and speaking to people again.
Thanks, guys.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.